Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Trumos Perek Ches, starting Halacha Daled. We're learning today Daf Ayin Tes, all the way on top by the Mishnah. In Parshas Koirach, the Torah writes, Va'ani hine nosati locha. This is speaking to the Kohanim, es mishmeres trumoisai. That Hashem says that, behold, I have given to you the safeguarding of tirumoisai. It's written without a vav. It's pronounced in the plural. Eim la mikra, eim la mesoides. We'll touch upon this in a moment when we learn it inside. Certainly the pronunciation gives the word terumoisai the understanding of plural, that there's a mitzvah to safeguard my trumois, and we're going to see in our Mishnah what the plural is. Now, the principle is that we have to safeguard truma. Safeguarding truma means kipshutai, make sure it doesn't get ruined. But safeguarding truma also means that there's a positive commandment to make sure the truma does not become tamei. Just for the record, not being metamei truma, or someone who's metamei truma, is over on a lav also. But in today's daf, we're not going to focus on the lav part. We're going to be focusing on the mitzvahs asay of safeguarding, of being shomer trumais. And we're going to start learning about potential exceptions. First of all, vadai truma has to be safeguarded. Truma temeya, as we learned many times, has to be burnt. What do I mean by it has to be burnt? First of all, on one hand, the kohen can derive benefit from its burning. It's not asur bahana, but we want for it to be burnt as soon as possible because we don't want for a michshol to happen, which is for a kohen not to know that it's tamei and to consume it. So truma temeya should be burnt. What happens if you have suffik truma that's tamei besufik? So we know the words, that truma is called truma teluya. Truma teluya means can't eat it, it might be tamei. Can't burn it, it might be tar. So you wait until when it becomes tamei. The Mishnah will begin with a three-way machloekes tanoim, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Gamliel. Interestingly, Rabbi Eliezer holds that the same obligation of safeguarding truma tohira, the same is to safeguard safek tuma. Truma that's safek tamei, because it might be tar. Same level of, and Hitaka learns it from trumoisai, that you should safeguard trumoisai, aim, if you're going to focus not on how it's written, which is called mikra, but if you're going to focus on how it's pronounced, the mesoides, the vowels is a mesoides because we don't have vowels in the Torah, same obligation. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, and in the Mishnah throughout, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, there'll be a few cases, they will all argue l'shitosayu. Rabbi Yeshua holds that even though you're not allowed to be metameit biyodayim, you cannot actively make a tamei, it might be tar, but you actually, if you want, you can expose it to tuma. You can do things that will make it become tamei quicker, which, by the way, there's a purpose for that, because since you're not burning it right away, someone might not know that it's safek tamei, and they might eat it. No, there is a maila to Rabbi Yeshua. And Rabbi Gamliel, as we'll see in the first case, we have a Rabbi Gamliel, you can't expose it, you can't bring it closer to tuma. But on the other hand, you don't have to have this level of safeguarding, as we'll see when we learn the Rabbi Gamliel inside. Next case in the Mishnah, this is very important, not safek tamei, but if there is truma that vadai will become tamei. It's not tamei yet, but it certainly will become tamei. And there's a purpose, as we'll see, why it would be beneficial for you to be metamit right now. It's going to become tamei anyway. There's a benefit. We'll see various scenarios. Rabbi Yeshua goes even further the way it's written in the Mishnah. Not only do you not have to safeguard it, not only could you expose it to tuma, in this case, Rabbi Yeshua holds, the way we're going to learn the Mishnah today, that you can mamish be metamid biyodayim to prevent some loss. And Rabbi Eliezer, according to his opinion, holds no. Unless something is now tamei, you have a positive commandment of safeguarding it, and certainly you're not allowed to be metamid biyodayim. Once we're going to have this machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, the Mishnah will give you a scenario where l'kula alma, even when something vadai will become tamei, everyone will agree that you're not allowed to be matamed biyodayim. We're going to learn a case b'negeya truma, and then the Mishnah will broaden it b'negeya bigger klolet, bigger rules. One example of the Mishnah will be that if nashim sha'amru lahem goyim tnu lanu achas mikem and v'nitma, they were saying that we want you to give us over one woman and we're going to defile her. And if you won't give us over one woman, we're going to defile all of you. In other words, something vadai will become defiled. Here, Lukula Alma, the Mishnah says, Yitamu kulchem va'al yimasru lehem nefesh achas mi Yisrael, the concept of ein doichen nefesh bifnei nefesh. So this is going to be big topics, way beyond Trumos. But again, the ikar of the daf today will be learning Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. In the first case, we have a Rabbi Gamliel, but only in the first case. We're going to have 3 cases in the Mishnah where they're going to argue, each one standing by their opinion. And God willing, in the beginning of the Gemara, for those of us who remember that we learned a similar topic in Rab Chanina Skana Kehanim, which is in Bavli Psachim Daf Yudalad, if you remember a couple of dafim that the Gabbai loved about Tum and Tara. And over there, we're speaking about if a person, it's Erev Pesach, and you have chametz, that's Truma, but it's chametz, it has to be burnt. It's going to be burnt. But you have truma tohira, chametz, truma temeya, chametz. Machloek is tanoim, Rab Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, whether you can burn them together. Burning them together would mean that it could be that when you're going to touch them together, prior to burning them, you're going to be metame, the truma tohira, which is going to get burnt anyway. So there also, the logic of Rabbi Yeshua basically is in our Mishnah that something that will not be eaten anyways, no longer has to be safeguarded. But actually, we're going to see that there is a machlokes, the way we will learn today, between Rab Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, bishitas Rabbi Yeshua. And that will be very consequential on how to learn the Mishnah over here. This is today's daf. So we're going minakotze from Agadata to a real classic Gemara, Mishnah and Gemara. Daf Ayin Tes Amud Aleph. We can do this nice and slow. Says the Holy Mishnah. The first case number 1. Chaviyis shal truma shenol de law safek tuma. You have a barrel of truma, just as a mashal. You have wine, and now it is safek tamei. Now, Aviv, you have to remember one thing: the Mishnah is not chayev to tell you how it came to be that way, but this is not so pashut. Why is this not so pashut? Because we have rules. There's a general rule that safek tamei b'reshus harabim, sfek otar, safek tamei b'reshus hayachid, sfek tamei. We learned this from Soita. That Rambam learns a limud for b'reshus harabim tar. So how is it even shaykh to have a suffix? I mean, once the halacha paskins tard or tamei, we would act accordingly. When there would be a suffix tuma b'reshus hayachid sfeikoi tamei, that means you can burn it. It's not toilen. We paskin tamei. So this actually, there's a big machlokes rishonim and how to understand pshat in the Mishnah. We have enough time. So Chevra, look at the Rashirilio, the second shtickle on the top line. So he brings shenoidel law suffix tuma peirush Rashi zal. Guys, a lot of this we learned in Psachim, in Chanina Skana Kehanim, because that's the main sugi and Babli about Tum and Tara. Kigoy, and he gives an example, Shenichnas Adam Tamei Lisham, a person whose Vadei Tamei entered into the room where you had this barrel of Truma wine. Elama, you have a doubt, Safik Naga ba Safik Le Naga. So on that, asks Toisvis, Heichi Dami, Ibrishus Ayachid, Svekoi Tamei. Svekoi Tamei means that according to Toisvis, it should be burnt. It's not tuluya, it's tamei. And if it happened in what we call a reshus harabim, which means in a location where you had more than 2 people, 3 people or more, sveikoi tar. So he just quotes v'nira lari lafarish. He gives a gavaldik klal that there were 2 barrels in a reshus hayachid, 2 barrels. A person who was tamei vadai touched in one of them. He just doesn't remember which one he touched. We just had this a few days ago. Remember the 2 shvilin? What happens if they both ask together? That's what's happening over here. So this guy wants to know that Dvar Torah, both of them are Tuluyas Dvar Torah. It's not Safek Tamei. Why? Because you cannot compare this to the source from where we learn Safek Tamei B'Reshus Hayachid Sfek Tamei, which is from the Soita. Why is that? Because by the Soita, it's possible that the man and the woman, they were matama themselves. It's possible. So when we paskin l'chumra sfeikoi tamei, because it could be to paskin, they're both barrels are tamei, cannot be because the man remembers I only touched one. So whenever you can't give a psak when you know that the psak is incorrect. How does the jive in the dinim of Shtei Shvil, and I don't want to go into it right now. Just want to let you know that the example that Tosfos would give, it was b'diuk this. There were two barrels. A man who was tamei walked into the room and he touched one of them in a way that he was matama that one. He doesn't know which one he touched. He went to a beis din, he went to a Rav, and he told him this case. The Rav paskins that both of them are safek tamei. He cannot say that they're both vaday tamei. He can't paskin that. Can't paskin tar. Okay, that will be just one example. So what's the issue? Aside of the love, there is a positive commandment, like we mentioned, to guard truma. Here you can argue, which will be the sheet of Rabbi Yeshua throughout, truma that is not allowed to be eaten, like over here. If you have a suffix, if it's tame, you can't eat it. But you can't eat it. If you cannot eat it, you're not mechuyev to guard it. Rabbi Eliezer, on the other hand, says, who cares? Maybe it's tahar. I don't care if you can't eat it. And like we mentioned, when it says,
but according to Rabbi Eliezer, right, you can make fuel or other stuff.
I'm sorry?
According to Rabbi Eliezer, when he says no, but you can't eat it, but you can make fuel or whatever.
No, you cannot make fuel because only truma that's vadai tamei can be used for fuel. Only truma tamei bevadai, so it's called telu. You know what happens? Okay, you have to wait until it becomes tamei vadai. You have to wait for that to happen. It's a matter of time. Everything slowly disintegrates. Everything slowly becomes tummy. Okay. So Rabbi Eliezer oimer, if this barrel was in a exposed area, which means in a location that it's unprotected, in a location where the chances that it will become tummy quickly is heightened, you are still obligated to guard it, even though you can't have it. You're chayiv yenichenu b'makam hamutzna. You have to put it in a concealed place, in a place where the likelihood of it becoming tummy is diminished. Similarly, if this barrel is uncovered, a barrel that's uncovered is likely to become tummy quicker. You are obligated to cover it. In other words, the same obligation that one has to guard truma when it's tohoira, the same is when it's a teluya. The same, it makes absolutely no difference. And he learned that, as the Rashi earlier brings, from the Mishmeres to Rumoisoi, and he interprets it the way it's pronounced. It's called Eim Lamasoidis. To Rumoisoi means God says, safeguard my trumais. Plural. What's plural? Plural means safeguard truma tohaira and safeguard truma tuluya. However, on the other hand, Rabbi Yeshua Oimer, the opposite. Now, the opposite to a limit. Not that you could be matame it yakid and then use it for fuel. Biyodayim, you can't. It's called actively contaminating it is prohibited, even according to Rabbi Yeshua. But indirect contamination is something that you should do. We don't like teluya. People are going to eat it by accident. If it's in an area that for it to become tummy, if ever, it will take a longer time. No. Expose it. Put it in an exposed area. If the barrel or the covers of the barrels, according to Tosfos, was mechusa, adarabba yigalena. Now remember this nakuda. This will be the main beginning of the Gemara. In this case, even Rabbi Yeshua that says there's no mitzvah of guarding it, but there is a lav, like I mentioned. Rabbi Yeshua will still hold that to be metama something biyodayim is us. This is very important, this nakuda. Now you have the third opinion. Rabbi Gamliel is only going to be mentioned in the first case of the Mishnah, which is safek tuma, by truma. Rabbi Gamliel says, lo yechadish badavar. Lo yechadish badavar. You know, the Marafulda has good oisias. Al yechadish badavar. It's 10 lines from the top. On one hand, she'ein sarach l'shoimra. You don't have to guard it. But you can't expose it to tuma. Leave it the way it is. Somewhere in between. Yakir is saying something, but since he's on mute, Abashgacha Pratis, he's protesting. Mamachta protest. Okay. Now.
Rabbi, you sure is not concerned about putting a stumbling block in front of someone?
What's the stumbling block? Let me hear.
If it's open, somebody may touch it.
You're asking a question, Kevan, on the whole din
right.
of Truma Tuluya. Which is you have to wait. Yeah? Okay. Now, case number 2, and I'm going to call this case number 2, Tachap the Gemara. Now we're learning about a scenario. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua will basically be saying the same, but they're going to go more. Always, Rabbi Eliezer makes no difference. Rabbi Yeshua is going to be lenient. I would say that the Nukud of Rabbi Yeshua is that if Truma cannot be eaten, this case, that case, there's no more obligation to guard it. There is no more obligation to guard it. But here, Rabbi Yeshua will allow for you to be metama'id biyadayim, to actively contaminate it. What's the second case where you have Truma tohira, but it will for sure become tamei? Case of the Mishnah will be, you have, where's Michael? You have a vat. It's not like the filter, but it's similar to the filter. Any wine press has a top vat in Belashon of the Mishnah, gas, where you put the grapes, where it's squeezed. And then after it gets pressed, it works its way down and it's collected in a lower vat. Higher vat, lower vat. Someone has in the lower vat, listen to my words, guys, chulin temein. Nothing wrong with chulin temein. We said even a kohen can eat chulin temein. Yeah, we know that if you drink or eat a certain amount midrabanan, you become tamei, but it's a much lower level of tuma. A kohen could become tamei. A kohen cannot become tamei to corpse tuma. Chulin temein. And now someone forgot that it's chulin temeim, and they pressed grapes that are truma. So now you have wine that's tohoirin in the top, and the way gravity, let's say it takes 10 seconds, in which it's going to fall down to the bottom vat.
There's no way to stop.
Oh, the only way to prevent the truma tohoira of falling to the bottom is that there is a place where you can put a side utensil. The utensil that you have at your side, those kelim are tamei. But in the kitchen, away over a few over there, you have the kelim that are tohirim. Everyone, I'll say this by heart, everyone is moida that if going to where you have kelim tohirim and coming back, you'll still save the minimum amount, which is of a revius. You have to do that. Even though, understand what's happening. I'm not even talking about meduma. When the truma tohira falls into the chulin temeim, and there's no ratio of 100 to 1. So what's the din aviv? What's the din then? It's meduma. But don't forget, a kohen can have meduma. A kohen can have, the kohen will not be allowed to have this meduma because the truma will become tamei. In other words, if it goes into the bottom, it's a big loss. Anyways, it's meduma. Okay, it's one level of loss, but the kohen can have it. Now, not even the kohen can have it. You chap that? So if you are able to salvage what's considered chashuv, which is a revius, vada, you have to salvage it. The case of the Mishnah is you can't even do that. You have kelim tohirim that are so far away, it can be seconds, that if you're going to go get them and come back, you'll have nothing. So what's the shaila? Can I take the kelim temeim, capture the truma? Here I'm being metame the truma biyodayim. Why am I doing it? To save my chulin. If the truma doesn't fall into it, not only will there not be meduma, even a Yisrael can have it. It's tameim, but you can have it. That's the second case. Here, Rabbi Yeshua is even more lenient. He holds that since it's for sure, if you don't do anything, listen, whether you catch it in the kelim tameim or whether it falls on the bottom, it's becoming tamei anyway. That's his heter. It's becoming tamei anyway. You can save what you can save. Even though the only way to do it is to be matamid biyodayim. That's already that's very good, Shlomo. If it falls down, even a kohen cannot eat the mixture. It's when you have truma that falls into chulin, if you take out the truma and tara, and you don't have the ratio of 100 to 1, which is, it's not bottled, that's called meduma. The duma can be eaten by a kohen. Kohen can have it. Kohen can have chulin, the kohen can have truma. But here, since the chulin are temeim, no one can have it. So let's read it inside. If you have a barrel of truma wine, he didn't say press it. It broke. It fell in there. It fell in there by accident. And guys, the key is that the chavius that broke has in it truma tohira. And in the bottom vat, you have chulin temeim. I'm just adding the words that are essential. There is no 100 to 1. By the way, we learned above that lav dafka tuma is nullified in 100. So whichever way. Point is that if the truma tahira, not suffix, will fall and it's on the way to falling, it's going down, it's going to ruin everything. Here says the Mishnah, if you can salvage a revius, even though you're going to lose the rest. Salvage would mean, like I gave an example, you have kalim tahirim in a room down, but you have to go, run, and get it, and come back. In the Vaila, water is pouring. So if you can moide Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yeshua she'im yachal hatzal memenu even only a revius b'tahara, even though that will mean that you're going to lose 1,000 revius in, so be it. Yatzil, everyone will agree that you are obligated to go and get the kalim tahirim to the detriment of all else. Where do they argue? The imlav, they argue in a case where no matter what you do, the truma is gonna become tummy. That's vadai. There's a question, two ways. Either it's going to become tummy the way it is, or you are going to take it into kalim tameim. You're not going to allow it to fall into the gas hatachtoina. So what are you benefiting? You're benefiting the chulin. You're not benefiting the trumas when it comes tummy anyways. The imlav, here we have the machloikas. That Rabbi Eliezer Oimer, like he had in the Reisha, he doesn't care whether it's suffix tamei. He doesn't care if it's going to become tamei. Right now, you have truma tahira. You're not allowed to be metame it. Take it with the tamei. Let it fall down.
The wine press is leaking the entire time. Doesn't matter what you do, even if you don't squeeze it, the juices are going down.
Correct. That's the whole point, Kevin. I take back my word squeezing. You have a huge keli, a barrel of truma tahira fell in the top of it, and it's beginning to work its way down. Let's say it takes 10 seconds. Let's say it takes 5 seconds. And you have a keli tameya. Now, here you have to know the halacha right away. So
right,
here, it says, you let it fall down. Va'al yitamenu b'yodav. You're not allowed. You're not allowed to be metamed b'yodayim. And so Shlem is making a good point. We're beginning the sugi. He's arguing. He's challenging what I just said. He's saying that you're not mamish being metamit, and we're going to leave that for the next shiur. Mamish. Right now, I'm learning the Mishnah bedafka the way I'm learning it. That the Reisha and the Seifa, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua is l'shito sayu, with the big difference that in the Reisha, Rabbi Yeshua says explicitly, uncover the barrel, expose it, do things to bring it closer to Tumah, but don't actively. Here, I'm going to say now, active. Now, before the Mishnah brings Shitas Rabbi Yeshua, this is an unusual formulation. I want you to know. We're going to give another case, very similar, not the same, but similar, where again, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. What's the second case? I'm calling both of them the second case. The shemen is truma. There's no trumantara here, guys. There's no trumantara. What you have is you have oil. It was in a barrel. The barrel, let's say, cracked. The barrel is spilling. What's the issue? If it's going to fall on the floor, it's going to become absorbed in the floor. It's going to get lost. Don't forget that the mitzvah of guarding truma, like I mentioned in the beginning, doesn't only mean safeguarding it from truma. It means also kepshutai. Don't throw it out. You have to safeguard it. Here, the oil is falling. The problem is that for me to salvage it, I have kalim that are tameim. I can save it, but I'm making it tamei, or it's going to get lost. And now, Yakir, to your point, truma tameim at least is good for fuel. You could use it for something. It's not asr b'hana. If it gets absorbed in the ground, it's kind of lagamre lost. So here again, that for you to get a keli that start, even though it's going to take time, even though during this time some of the oil will fall on the ground, some of it will start to get absorbed. But if going to wherever the tahar keli is and coming back, you can, at the end of the day, you foresee that you can save at least a revius. Everyone agrees you're chayiv to do that, and you're not allowed to use a keli that's tummy. Where do they argue? Similar to the case of the wine, the imlav. No, if you're going to go and get a keli that's tahar, you're losing it all. All means less than a revius, or even less. Here again, Rabbi Eliezer Oimer, tedet v'tibala. Let it get lost. Va'al yivalenu biyodov, don't ruin it. Yivalenu means to ruin it here. Don't ruin it means that you have here a tamei keli. You cannot allow to use it. Like I mentioned, What would be the mile of saving it in a Tomei Keli? I'll tell you, you can use it for fuel. It will become Trumei Tamei, but at least you will have it. However, Va'al Zoi, both in the case of the wine and in the case of the oil, by the way, both could have been in the other way also. Stam, it's just not to confuse. Could have been a vat of oil and could have been a barrel of wine. But in both of these cases, Rabbi Yeshua says again, only when you can't save a reviz. This is not the truma that the Eibishter said that Mishmeres Terumoisai. Doesn't go to this. He goes aim la mikra, which means that even though you pronounce it in the plural, he says, no, it's written without a vav. Terumois, between the mem and the saf, there is no vav. So he learns it in the singular. Gar truma that you can eat. This truma you're not eating anyways. Ela mila achla. In other words, only truma that could be eaten is a truma that you have to safeguard. Since this will not be eaten anyways, and you can't even salvage significant revius, so there's no mitzvah to guard it. Since there's no mitzvah to guard it, you can take the Tomei Keli and have it fall into the Tomei Keli. Okay. Now, the Mishnah is going to tell you a scenario where Rabbi Yeshua agrees to Rabbi Eliezer by Truma, and then we're going to expand it, like I said in the intro, in the case of the Goyim with the women. Baal tetama keitzad. Rabbi Yeshua says, where will I be moided to you? Where will I agree to you that you're not allowed to contaminate Truma biyodayim? Even though you would have thought, based on what I said, that you could. This is the case. If you're traveling, and you have loaves of Truma, and on the road, Amar le'nochri, a non-Jewish person finds the Jew and he wants to eat, and he's holding him up and he's telling him, listen here, Amat, this is a Brazilian ganef. In Brazil, they're nice. In Brazil, when they steal, then after they ask you, do you have money to take a taxi home? It happened to my aunt twice. They gave her money. That's after they bagamvered her with a gun and they took her jewelry. It was terrible. But they gave her money to take a taxi home. Because they're nice people. It's crazy. So this guy, he's not Stama bandit. He's hungry, as hungrik. The Jew has bread. The Jew begins with Mises, Truma. He doesn't want to know of Truma. He doesn't want all the bread. Yakir is laughing. I get this.
Baruch Hashem, a choshever mensch.
Yeah. So he's telling the guy, listen here, ich darf essen. Tein li achas mehem. Give me one of these loaves right now. I just want to know on the side that midrabanan, I don't want to get into this, midrabanan, goyim, are tamei by default from when they're 1 day old, which means the level of tuma of a zav, which means that if they touch the loaf of bread, it becomes tamei midrabanan. But so what? When we are mechuyev, we keep rabbinic law. So him taking the bread is a bayah, and he tells him, listen here, if you're not going to give me one loaf of bread, because the Jew says, listen, I would love to help you, but I can't. It's truma. And what? And you cannot touch truma. So he says, listen, if you're not going to give me one loaf of bread, I'm going to touch all of them. No, it's you're for sure. You're going to lose the it's becoming tummy anyways. How great is that? So here, Rabbi Yeshua will concede. I'm sorry. So first of all, Rabbi Yeshua will agree that you're not allowed to give it to him, because giving it to him, and I'm comparing it shleimah to the case of a keli, even though the Jew is not touching it, but he's giving it into his hand. It's like the wine going into the keli. It's almost the same. Let's call this biyodayim. There is a machloikis, but even though there is a machloikis what to do, Rabbi Yeshua will not allow you to give it to him. That you can do, because biyodayim you can't do it. But still there is a machloikis, which is, Rabbi Eliezer says, this is gavaldik, that yetam es kula. Va'al yitan lo yachas mehem. You don't accommodate him. Guys, even though your refusal is a cause, you can argue. The blaming the victim. Your refusal of giving him one bread is causing the nachri to touch all of them. Doesn't matter. How can I give it to him? Mishmeres Terumois. I got a safeguard. However, daf ayin tasamid beis Rabbi Yeshua Omer. Even though you can't give it to him, but do what you could to prevent the others of becoming tummy. What can you do? Yaniach lefanav alasela. That's a great answer. So this is already indirect. You're putting it on a stone. That means you're directing the goy which one he should take. That's not called biyodayim. It's not called active. It's a little bit removed, and that's good enough. If you remember, guys, we had a machloikes, Tanoim, two people right in the Durham. Two people were mudded. One person made a neder not to have enough from the other. Reuven cannot have enough from Shimon. They're working in a desert. Only Shimon has the bread. One eitzah there was for Shimon to put the bread on a piece of rock, for him to be mafked, to say that it's hefker, and then Reuven can take it. And there we had a shitas Rabbi Yosi that says that hefker kematana. That's Rabbi Yosi. That I remember. Hefker kematana. Just like by a matana, it only goes away from the ownership of the gifter when it enters the ownership of the recipient. Even by hefker, it only goes away from the ownership of, in my case, Reuven, after it goes into the ownership of Shimon. So him being mafked is not a solution because Shimon is having hana anyways. This is a similar, put it on the rock. Now the Mishnah says, I'm going to give you a case where you can't even put it on the rock. And that was the mission. That was what we quoted in the words of introduction. That if you have a woman, and unfortunately, so you have a nachri that told the group, listen here, Tenu lanu achas miken and unetama, they're being very clear what they're going to do to her. And these are the options. And if not, harei onu metamem kulchem. Here, you can't even designate one. We're going to leave it vague right now. There are some pratim that we're not going to speak about right now. Yetames kulam. Here, no, you can't do anything like Rabbi Eliezer. And the al yimimsru lehem nefesh achas mi Yisrael. But Yidden are not allowed to deliver a single Jew, says the Manafulda, 3 lines from the top, Yetam Kulam, V'zeh moide Rabbi Yeshua, not even to designate one. Here, it's not about direct or active, not active, biyadayim, not biyadayim. No. Why? Because the ein doiche nefesh mipnei nefesh. By the way, this is very similar to the words of Chazal over there in Sanhedrin when we want to know regarding all of the 3 sins for which we have to die, right? Yehargu va'al yavod. One of them is to murder, and for murder we had the svara. What's the svara? My chazi, that your blood is redder than my blood. In other words, we don't get, even though the goyim. Now, the case of the Mishnah is where the goyim did not specify whom. They said, give us one. It might be different if the goyim specify specific ones. So they were the ones that designated. And even over there, that's a big topic that unfortunately in Golus came up a lot. But we'll leave it at this. We're going to come back to all of these dinim. What we're going to begin right now with the Gemara is, like we mentioned in the words of introduction, the sugya of Pesachim. Now, before we get there, I just want to open up with the Gemara. So, guys, let's go back to the first case. The first case was you have Safek Tuma, Truma, that's Tamei Misafek. So we had Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Eliezer says there's no difference whether something is Vaday Tahor or even if something is Safek. Safek means it might be Tahor. He learns it from the plural Trumoisoi, that we are equally obligated to guard it. That means we have to make an extra effort to keep those barrels covered, to keep those barrels that anyways no one can eat or drink, to keep them in a room where there's less chances for it to become tameh. You are obligated to guard it actively. Rabbi Yeshua, on the other hand, says you can take all of the steps you need to take to expose it to tumah, but you can't directly be metameh it. And then we have the shit of Rabbi Gamliel, status quo. You can't, you don't have to protect it, but you're not allowed to actively expose it. Yeah. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yosef Rabun, that medivrei shloshtan, from all of the 3 we learn that teluya asar l'sarfa means even Rabbi Eliezer, even the most, even Rabbi Yeshua, the most lenient, no one says you can burn it. Who said to burn it? Yakir said. That's the Gemara was talking to you. Burning it, you can't do it. Because as long as halachically it's not vaday tamei, you can't destroy it. That's another thing. You would say, according to Rabbi Yeshua, if we don't apply the mitzvah of safeguarding, why can't you burn it? You can't. You can't actively destroy it. Okay. Tuluya is much
Rabbi,
worse.
help me understand the difference between Rav Gamliel to Rabbi Yeshua. I don't see the difference between them.
Rabbi Yeshua,
it's the same.
Rabbi Yeshua is telling you that change the circumstance to see to it that it becomes tummy quicker. Rabbi Gamliel holds, I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to change the circumstance for the worse, but I'm not allowed to change. I should not change it for the better. I should not extrally guard it. Okay, so now here we go. Chavraya b'shem Rabbi Lazar, guys, we're starting a sugya that's going to go on for a while. And I think the best thing to do is even before we read the Chavraya b'shem Rabbi Lazar, before we read it, there's enough time. We can do this at Marafulda. I want to learn that Asherilio. I read both yesterday. I think it was clearer. It was shorter and clear. Look inside the left column, third line from the top in the Asherilio. Okay. And there's the first case of the Mishnah, Safik Tamei. We're calling that Chavias Harashoina. And then we have the second case in the Mishnah, the Chavias that broke in the gas al yoina, gas tachtoina. We're focusing Bishitas Rabbi Yeshua. That's the Nakuda. And I'm going with the premise, Shloima, that in the case of the second case of Chavias, that the Rabbi Yeshua holds that you can take Tamei Kalim, and I'm going to use the words right now, which means that you are allowed to be Metamed Biyodayim. And you know what? The way we are going to understand a Mishnah in Masechtas Pesachim that we're going to learn again regarding burning Chametz, Truma, Tameya, and Truma Tohoira, or Truma Besafik together or separate, it's actually going to come out the way we're going to learn right now that there is a machlokes Tanoim between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. What is the sheet of Rabbi Yeshua? And something very uncomfortable will come out from it. That whoever learned the first clause in the Mishnah did not learn the second clause of the Mishnah. Either you can, in both cases, be metamed biyodayim, or in both cases, you cannot be metamed biyodayim. Other. And let's read it. I know we'll read it. We'll read the Gemara. Let's just begin with the background. So says that Asherilio that this is really a machlokes the Perek Hamad Pesachim Daf Yud Daled about Aviv Sarfin Truma Tohirim Tameya be'erev Pesach. Same. It's very similar to me to the second case of the Mishnah, because this Truma is going to get burnt. In our Mishnah, it's about will it become Tamei. It's not the same, but it's going to get, meaning you won't be able to eat it. No one is eating it. And when you remember the details in Pesachim, that we have that hour in which you Bechlal cannot eat it. Elamah, that's the hour to burn it. And that's really the premise of Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua holds that if something cannot be eaten anyways, it's not under the obligation to safeguard. And what's the machlokes? Guys, remember who says so? The Rameir Savar, the Kiv and the Ozla Leibud, since it's going to get destroyed anyways. And why? Mishum Isur Chametz, because we are obligated to burn Chametz. Tashbisu. So Rab Meir holds Yochel Litama Biyodayim Ulusarfa. Even though Rab Meir doesn't say Bimatama Biyodayim, just the case of the Mishnah was this person has Chametz, Truma, Tameya, Vadai. He also has Chametz, Truma, Tohoira, Vadai. That's the case over there. Says Rav Meir, put them together and burn them. Which means prior to it being burned, you were Metamed. Doesn't matter. That's Rav Meir. I said Rav Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, I stand corrected. Rav Meir and Rabbi Yos. And we're going to learn that both of them are of the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, which means it's a machlokes bishitas Rabbi Yeshua. But Rabbi Yosi says, he argues with Rav Meir, loy mi boye, not only in the case that I just mentioned, where you had chametz, truma chametz, tohira, truma chametz, tameya, there for sure you cannot put them together. Loy mi boye de b'tohira, palik, does Rabbi Yosi argue with Rav Meir, even with Rabbi Yeshua, you cannot put them together. Make two pyres. No, you can burn them. He says even more. He says, Elafilu bit tuluya. This is important because tuluya will be the first case of the Mishnah. Elafilu bit tuluya nami paleg. That what? That even you have chametz tamei vadai, chametz safek tamei, and it's in the fifth hour. You got to burn the chametz. Make two pyres. Even l'shitas Rabbi Yeshua. In other words, according to Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Yeshua never allows you to be metamed biyodayim. And the premise of the Chavraya will be is that according to Rabbi Yosi, in the second case of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yosi will not allow you to be to take tamei receptacles and take it. Why? Because you're being metamed biyodayim. which means that the second case of the Mishnah follows Rav Meir. Problem is, if Rav Meir authored the Mishnah, then in the Reisha, which is where you have these two barrels with Tosfos, and they're both Safek Tamei, what would Rav Meir hold, according to Rabbi Yeshua? That you can be metamed biyadayim. What does our Mishnah say? You can expose it, uncover the barrel, put it b'makem in makem aturfa from mimakem hamutzna, which means that the Reisha of the Mishnah was quoting Shitas Rabbi Yosi, Bishitas Rabbi Yeshua, and the Seifa, the second case of the Mishnah, is Rav Meir, and that's we don't want for that to happen. Why would Rabbi do that? But that's what it must be. That's what he's saying. I'm reading weiter in the Rashirilya. The Kalmar Hasam Rabbi Yosi ha'ech nisroif afilu hatuliyim temeya shema yova yeli yitarena. And the Hasam pligi tanoi beplukted Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yeshua. And what the Rashirilya wants to point out, and I don't have to read the rest, is that the way we learned this over there in Psachim, Daf Yudalad, Rabbi Chaniskano Kehanim, is that both Rabbi Meir, this is the key, and Rabbi Yosi, they both side with Rabbi Yeshua. So there's a machloikes tanoim bishitas Rabbi Yeshua. He's lenient, but to what degree? Now we can read the words in the Gemara, and it's Gemasik Midvash. So Chavraya, this Rabbi Lazar is an Amoira. The Chevra said in the name of the Amoira Rabbi Lazar that Chavius Arashayna, which is the first clause of the Mishnah, Aviv, Chavius Arashayna means Safek, Tamei. Fact that even Rabbi Yeshua does not allow you to be Metamed Biyodayim. So it was authored when it says Rabbi Yeshua Omer. Who was the one that had those words? Rabbi Yosi. Rav Meir never would have had those words. Rav Meir would learn that Rabbi Yeshua says, stick your tummy hands into it, bring something tummy, be metamed, and then burn it, Yakir. And who said before, what's the mile of that? The mile of that is, I know by Tuluya you don't have such an option. Actually, no. We're saying that by Tuluya you can have that option. That why it's a michshol. That's how you said, Kaven. Maybe someone will drink it. And a chanami, that's what Rav Meir holds, that Rabbi Yeshua holds, since you're not obligated to safeguard it because you can't have it anyways, be metamit and burn it. And v'hashniya, the fact that the Mishnah allows you to capture it in tamei vessels, whether in the barrel, whether in the oil, makes no difference. That you are metama b'yodayim, that only follows Rabbi Meir. And now let's just elaborate. Chavraya Amri, which means what the Chavraya meant to say is that v'leis Rab Meir moideba. Rav Meir was not the words that you had in the Mishnah could not have come from Rabbi Meir, but Rav Meir would go further. Not that you could go further. The way I understand this is that you have to go further. Either there's nothing wrong contaminating it, or you have to contaminate it. But those words was not said by Rabbi Yeshua le Rav Meir. He would say more than that. And the Hashniya can only go to Rav Meir. V'leis Rabbi Yoid, it's other. And we're going to stop over here. And now, is that a kasha? It's not geshmak. It's not ideal. But it must be that way. And we're going to have another daf and a half into this phenomenal sugya.
All right. Can you do a 30-second summary of the three opinions?
Yes, I could. Very good. So I would even say better that in the Mishnah we had three cases. Okay? And you know what, Kevin, just for the review, I don't want to speak about Rabbi Gamliel, even though, God forbid, I just want to go to Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, because that's where we find them throughout. If Truma cannot be eaten, why? Either because it's already a safek, or because we know that it will become Tamei. For that, we had two cases. According to Rabbi Eliezer, it doesn't matter. Since it's not yet Vadai Tamei, you have to safeguard it as if it's Tahar.
Right.
Rabbi Yeshua says no. Since either Safek or it's going to become Tamei, you will not be eating it anyways, then you are under no obligation to safeguard it. But there's a nuance of no obligation to safeguard it. What does that mean? In the first case, you expose it to Tuma. In the second, and in the second case, you actively contaminate it. And then in the third case of the goy, you put it on a rock. You direct the goy which one he should take, but you can't actively do it. So you see that it sounds like there is a boundary. But in the middle case, the way we are learning it, there's absolutely no boundary, and we are learning that follows Shitas Rav